done, again, another wonderful job. So let's give them a round of applause. As this is Corporate Communion Sunday, we had requested Bishop Taylor speak to the parish. And so he has an important topic today that we've asked him to speak on. So I hope that you'll give him your attention, and he'll also take questions as well. Bishop Taylor.
Well, the topic I was given was full communion with the Catholic Church, and I might be able to deal with that pretty quickly, and then we can talk about saints also if you want. Full communion with the Catholic Church means embracing what the Catholic Church teaches. We find many people who are at variance with what the Church teaches or does, and they don't thereby cease to be Catholic, or they don't thereby fall out of communion with the Church just because they got their head on wrong or something. And so, you know, it's just like in a family, you'll have a family member that maybe is lived off, but they're still part of your family. You know, so it's the same thing is true in the church. And there are things that would disqualify someone from going to communion, like maybe they're in a marriage that's not recognized by the church or something like that, but they're not excommunicated. You know, they're still part of the family. It's just that there's a bit of an impediment there for them going to communion. So I would not be one of the ones that says, you know, everybody that disagrees with the church teaching on any point is thereby cut out. You know, we've got people that use birth control, for instance, and that's contrary to the teaching of the church, but they're still members of the church. You know, we've got politicians who execute criminals, you know, and they don't, you know, they're very much contrary to what the church teaches, the gospel of life, but they don't fall out of communion with the church. We got politicians that are on the wrong side of the abortion issue, and that's very troubling. But on the other hand, that's a matter between them and God. They're still part of the church. They're still part of the family. And so, and we have to be very careful not to politicize things for coming there. So that basically, to fall out of communion with the church would be if you fall into apostasy, which is where you reject something of the creed. For instance, we proclaim the creed in Mass every day, and you know, so you are out of communion with the church if there's something in the creed that you are no longer believing. And those have to do more with God, the Trinity, the Blessed Mother, those sorts of things there. So I don't know if that's a sufficient answer to that, but basically communion with the church is you're part of the family. Most people have some teaching of the church that they personally have a little bit of difficulty with, but that's just part of the deal. We're imperfect. Our ability to know and understand is imperfect. We got our blind spots, and by having blind spots doesn't mean that you're out of communion with the church. Good. Does anybody have a question on that topic? I don't know when I first heard the topic, I thought, oh, they're talking about Eastern Rite Catholics and whether they can come to Mass at a Latin Rite church. I didn't realize it's the other deal. We'd like to talk a little, yes.
To what degree are Protestants coming?
They are followers of Christ. They are baptized. If everybody is baptized, then you belong to the church writ large. You know already, but you're not in communion with the Catholic Church, the Roman Catholic Church. You know, that's right. But they're part of the family. So there's that. I would like to say a couple things about this. We got Michael Gibney up here, so I thought I might say a couple things about the path to sainthood. Have time to do that?
Yes, sir.
Okay. Did you have a question?
No.
Okay. There are two paths to being a canonized saint: heroic virtue and martyrdom. With heroic virtue, you have to go and see. The process is you write up the case, and Rome checks it out, and it looks like it's a promising one, and they declare him a servant of God. And then you do a study of the heroic virtues of that person, and go through all the different virtues. It's like 150 questions about their personal life. And after that study, if it's convincing, then they could be called venerable. And then, when someone's venerable, you can already, that gives you the green light to start praying to that person, asking for a miracle, asking for a favor. And then you're not supposed to do it until the church says it's okay. And so you got to wait till they become venerable. And then you pray for a miracle. I'll describe miracles in a minute. If it gets one miracle, it's authenticated, they become beatified. One more miracle, and they can be canonized. That's the heroic virtue path. And Michael McGivney is on that path. Okay. And he's blessed, I believe, isn't he? Yeah, so he's had one miracle. So he needs another for canonization. And if you are a blessed, then you are authorized for people to have devotion to you in a certain area. It's not the universal calendar, it's not the whole world. And so for Michael McGivney, it's probably the United States, something like that. The other path is martyrdom. And for martyrdom, you write up the basic study on the person, and it gets declared a servant of God because they don't have anything contrary to that. And then you do everything you would do for heroic virtue, because it's no good to be a non-virtuous person and become a martyr. Okay, so you have to do all the stuff you did for Michael McGivney about heroic virtue, but to show that he's a virtuous person, but do not have to get a miracle and then you have to do all the study regarding martyrdom. And then if he's declared a martyr, then he can be beatified without a miracle. And that's what the Blessed Stanley wrote. And then you designate a miracle for canonization.
So just one if they're a martyr?
Just one. Okay. Now, to show that someone is a martyr, it's more than just this person got killed. Okay? You've got to show that the intent of the killers, that he was killed out of hatred for the faith. He was not killed because they thought he was a communist, or because they were robbing the rectory, or some other thing, or had a traffic accident. But he was killed out of hatred for the faith. So in the case of Blessed Stanley Rother, we had to show that he was killed out of hatred for the faith, which was difficult in his case because the killers were never apprehended. And so how do you know what they think? Well, we do know that his was the 13th priest to be killed in Guatemala in a space of several years. And the church, we knew the intent of the intellectual killer. In other words, the authorities who sent the killers to do the deed. And because they were targeting the church, and his death fit the pattern of the others. And so we were able to show that, and the practice of the Guatemalan military regarding the death squads was they would capture some people, the military would, and say, you all are terrorists, we're going to kill you. And they would say, no, we're not. We're with the army. You got us read wrong. And the army would say, well, then we got a dirty deed for you to do to prove to us that you're loyal to us. And then they would send this death squad in to do the dirty deed. And then, so as not to have any witnesses, the army would then eliminate them so that there'd be no witnesses. Okay, that was the way it worked. Okay? And so we were able to show the intent of the military governor of the department, which is like a county, that he was a target, and it was out of hatred for the faith because it was the church itself and its leaders that were being killed. Catechists were, the parish in Santiago Titlan not only lost Father Rother, they lost 16 catechists that were killed by the military in there. So you have to show, for martyrdom, you have to show the intent of the killer, that it was out of hatred for the faith, and that the martyr could have perhaps gotten out of it, but remaining faithful was what was required. And so that's martyrdom. Okay, the miracle, what's required for a miracle? The idea of the miracle is that getting a miracle shows that this saint has got access in heaven, and they put a good word for you with the Lord. Okay, and so the reason for needing a miracle is a sign from heaven that this person is up there because he's getting stuff for us. Okay, and so that's the miracle. Now so what happens here? You got somebody that, and they're always medical miracles, because you got to show a documented before and a documented after, and there's no medical explanation of how that could resolve itself. Okay, so that's before and after. But there's a couple wrinkles. One is that you have to show. How do you show that it was this saint that got it? And if people are storming heaven and asking the Blessed Mother and asking everybody else to help out, how do you know which saint got it for you? Okay, and so it has to be a rather narrow set of circumstances to be able to show that intercession with this particular saint is the one that got it, and the miracle occurred only a brief time after the prayer seeking intercession. And so that doesn't happen very often, especially in a Christian country where everybody is praying to all the saints. And how do you know that somebody else's prayer didn't get the mark rather than your prayer? Okay. So there's that. So I like to think of the example of Mother Teresa, because her miracle was a Hindu woman, a Hindu woman who was more than happy to have lots of extra gods. And so included Mother Teresa in one of the people that she would pray to. But we know that those Hindu gods, they don't even exist, so they could have done it. So she prayed and got a miracle for that. So there was a non-Christian woman's prayer was answered by Mother Teresa, and that was one of her miracles. And so that was one way to be able to show that it was this person's prayer that got this miracle. And I think it was a Hindu woman praying for a Hindu person, another Hindu person. But she obviously she knew that Mother Teresa was a holy person, otherwise she wouldn't have included her in the list of prayers. So that's the short answer on miracles and why it's so tough to get a miracle for a saint. But another part of it is the miracles don't count until you got the green light to pray for miracles. And so, which is once they've been declared a servant of God. And an example of that is that in Oklahoma City, the grandson of the head of Catholic Charities back in the 1980s, the grandson was like a 10-year-old playing basketball and had a brain event, like a cerebral hemorrhage or something like that. And so they took him to the hospital right away. Nobody seemed to know about this except the immediate family. Archbishop went and they went to pray for him, and after anointing him, the Archbishop said, well, let's pray just to bless his family brother for healing for you, for the little boy. And they did, and then he unexpectedly resolved it pretty quickly after that. And so, of course, we don't know whether it was a medical intervention, the doctors were trying to do, whether that did it, but nevertheless, it was right after, and prayed just to bless his family brother. But Stanley Brother wasn't a servant of God yet, so presuming to pray to him was premature. And so the benefit of miracles is that we want the person who got the miracle to benefit from it. And so we're glad that kid recovered. But that does not count for a cause of canonization. So yes, that's a brief deal on that, and give you an idea of things that they never teach you in seminary that you learn doing. Yes.
I moved to Oklahoma City in '82, and And the rumor was going around that his heart was buried in Guatemala. Is that correct?
That's true. When he died in 1981, and his heart and all the blood that they sopped up and everything else that they would have removed during embalming was retained in Guatemala, and the heart is in a jar there in Guatemala. And there was a negotiation between the family and the people in Guatemala, because he'd given his whole self, his heart to them, but his family wanted his body back up here in the United States, and so that was the agreement that the heart would stay in Guatemala, and the rest of his body would come to the United States. One of the relics that I got is a drop of his blood, and it's in a crystal reliquary that was made when they moved his body. He was buried in the cemetery of his home parish initially, and his body has been exhumed and removed and now moved to the shrine in Oklahoma City. And in the doing of that, well, actually, that's not where that came from, but in the doing of that, they removed a rib, and all of the bone relics of Blessed Stanley are from that one rib that was removed when they moved his body. And in Guatemala, they produced relics of the blood, because his heart is there, and the blood that they collected. And it's got like a drop of his blood in that reliquary. So it's very powerful. But yeah, yes?
What are the potential negative consequences of praying to someone who's not actually in heaven?
The consequences of praying to someone who's not actually in heaven, if they're not in heaven, they won't get you anything. They've got no access. Now, we don't know that maybe he might be in purgatory, but if you're in purgatory, you're already en route to heaven. And so, I don't, there wouldn't be a negative. Now, if you're praying to someone who you know to be like satanic, there'd be like real negative consequences for something like that. But if you're just sincerely praying to someone and it turns out that he's not in heaven after all, or not yet in heaven after all. By the way, the miracle shows that he's not, that he's passed beyond purgatory, that he's actually in heaven. So, because while you're in purgatory, you don't have that kind of access. Anything else? Yes.
Jesus.
The person who stayed with you, that witnessed his death, could you tell us something about that time?
Yes.
That person?
He was the younger brother of the associate pastor in the parish, and the associate pastor had to flee also. He was the only eyewitness to it, and his life was in danger because they would have eliminated him as well as the death squad. So the Benedictines in Guatemala got him out of the parish and into Honduras, and then the U.S. Embassy in Honduras made arrangements for him to be able to come to the United States without a passport, because he could not go to his own government to get a passport. And so made arrangements for him to come to the United States without a passport to Oklahoma. And then he stayed with me. My parish had a large Spanish-speaking population. Well, at that time, it was about half the people. And I was able eventually to make arrangements for him to move into the home of a family in the parish. And then when his brother was, after a certain point, assigned to the town of Duncan, Oklahoma, and so he went then and lived with his brother down in Duncan, and then ended up marrying a local girl. And so he now is in Wichita Falls, Texas, installed in cable TV, I think, or something like that. But obviously that was a very traumatic, he would have been like a 19-year-old. Part of the deal was that I mentioned that the military recruited people forcibly, and they would go to these towns, and any boy that was a teenager, they would grab them and just take them in and recruit them in that way. So a lot of boys were spending the night in the church and in the rectory. And when the intruders came in, Francisco was unwilling to reveal to the killers that the presence of the other guys that were in the house that were seeking refuge. And so that's one reason why he complied with, like, leading him to Father Rother right away, rather than, I don't know, revealing the presence of all these other guys. He got his armed men in the house. When they went to the door, Francisco said to Father Rother, they've come for you. This was like 2 in the morning. And they've come for you. And Father Rother said, opened the door and said, go upstairs. So send him away. And there was a tussle. Father Rother had always said that that if they came for him, he would resist. And the reason was not to save his own life, because he knew that if they came for him, they'd be armed and he'd be a dead man anyway. But he was afraid that, knowing what he knew, having heard confessions, having just known stuff in the area, he was afraid that he might, in a moment of weakness, reveal something that would put someone else in danger. And so he was very public in the months preceding this, saying, if they come for me, they're not going to take me alive, and that's why. And so when they came for him, there was a tussle. They used a knife and mutilated him while he was still alive. You could see the blood splatter on the wall. And then the first thing that anybody actually heard was 2 shots to the temple on his head. And then the killers fled right away. And the nuns, there was a convent right by there, they came running, but he was already dead. But it was also resolved that if they came for him, he would endeavor to do it all in silence, because he was afraid that if he made a lot of noise, that the nuns would come and they would be in danger as well. And so that's kind of the circumstance of his death. Anything else?
Any other questions?
Well, I want to thank you all very much, and if you need a miracle, there are 2 guys to pray to right now, Michael McGivney and Blessed Stanley Rother.